My name is Ralph Engle. I was an AQ2 attached to VA-86. We were deployed on the USS America. I was on board from 72 to 75. I graduated from high school in 1970, and 2 days later I was in the Navy. I was one of those people that won the draft lottery. My number came up 002, so the next day I went and enlisted. I have an older brother that made a career out of the Navy. He put 28 years in, and so I was just figuring, I was going to go in the Navy anyhow and try for brother duty, which never happened. He was at Jacksonville after I finished boot camp in school, and I did go to Cecil Field, but a month after I went to Cecil Field, he went to Norfolk. And then about 4 years later, he was at Pax River, Maryland, and that's where I ended up getting my shore station at Pax River, Maryland. And I think I got there in May of 75, and in June of 75, his VP squadron he was attached to at Pax River, their whole function transferred back down to Jacksonville. So the 7 years I put in the Navy, as far as brother duty, we were in the same area for 4 months. So, I went into aviation. I liked working on aircraft, liked the thought of working on aircraft, and I was in an integrated weapons team. And I think our one CO was actually the gentleman that started the integrated weapons team, mainly because of the computer systems and it being controlling so much in the aircraft. We took rates, an AO, which is an ordnanceman, an AE, which is an aviation electrician's mate, an AT, which is aviation technician, and the AQs, which were fire control. That's what I was. And we, because of the complicated system with the computer and its interface, we would work with each other, because some of it would be their equipment, some of it would be ours, and we just started this integrated weapons team. I definitely enjoyed working on the aircraft. And after I left Cecil Field, I went up to Patuxent River, Maryland, where I worked at Strike, and we basically had one of every type of aircraft that the Navy had, because they would do different tests. And one day the test may be on F4, the next day it could be on an F-14, an A4, an A7. We had helos up there, we even had gliders up there. Never got to see any gliders fly, but there were 3 of them over in one hangar. My first deployment was Westpac over Vietnam, and I was due to get married, and we weren't supposed to be going on Westpac. We were supposed to be going to the Med, and arrangements had been made for me to go home, get married, and I was going to fly military airlift over to France, where I was going to meet the ship 30 days later. But about a week before the wedding and before we were ready to deploy, they said, "You're not going to the Med, you're going to Vietnam." So I flew home on a Friday evening, got married Saturday. Sunday, my wife and I flew down to Norfolk, and Monday morning I got on the ship and left. Now, 6 months later, we had R&R in Hong Kong, and my wife came over to Hong Kong, and we spent 10 days together there in Hong Kong. And it was about a year later when I actually came back home. But I think Hong Kong, with my wife being there, was probably my favorite port. We did a lot of sightseeing. I was fortunate because I worked what was flight ops. It was busy because I worked while the aircraft were flying, and launching, recovering, fixing them between flights, and it kept you busy. And basically, some days we would fly 12 hours, 16 hours, and you worked that entire time. And then you may only have 8 hours off, and then you'd come back, the next day and start all over again. We used to align the navigation system, we would power the planes up before the pilots got in them. And, you know, they wanted to have, you know, their systems ready to go, and that was part of our job, getting the navigation system. It took about 20 minutes to align it. But I really enjoyed, you know, the sea, going to sea and stuff. I had no complaints about the food, as you can see, and the bunks were small. You know, you were stacked 3 deep, you know, one on top of the other. And if you were smart and you had been to sea once before, the first thing you did was got into the berthing space quick and claimed the top rack. That way, you know, you didn't have people stepping on you as they were climbing up to the top rack. You got to step on them. So that was an important thing. You always try to get a top rack. The Liberty calls were nice, you know, seeing you know, all the different places of the world. We had 4 carriers when the peace treaty was signed over in Vietnam, and they had a picture of the entire task force with the 4 carriers. And I think that was possibly the only time they had 4 carriers in that same close proximity all at one time. They gave everybody a paper copy of the thing that they took. We were basically banned from being on any of the open decks because they didn't want any people in the picture. You know, they just wanted the ships, the destroyers, you know, all of our support for all the carriers all in one picture. Made a med cruise later, and I think our weapons shop, integrated weapons team, we lost no flights due to our shop the entire cruise, which was, you know, I guess something made me proud, you know, being part of it. And I maybe would have stayed in longer, but I almost put 4.5 years of my 7 years was at sea. And I had the 2 years at Pax River shore duty, and if I would have re-enlisted, I was going back to sea for another 4 or 5 years. And I had a new daughter, and I just decided to get out then and there. However, I ended up working for the Navy for a total of 35 years as a civilian after I got out of the Navy up in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania.